Hey Ninjas, in this video we're going to explore one-to-many relationships. We're going to build a website that has a team and then each team will have its own players. Now we're going to imagine we have a professional basketball team and we're not going to put any limits on how many players each team can have. That is something you can explore later on. So on our main page, this is our index page, we can create a team or we can create a new player. Let's create two teams. So we're going to create one called Ballers, and let's make them from New York. Then we'll create one more team. We'll call this one Slammers, and they'll be from Boston. And now we have the Ballers and the Slammers. The create new player will allow us to create new players. So let's create one called Sam Jones, age 24, position can be forward, and he can play for the Ballers. Let's create another player. Let's call this guy Jim Smith, age 27. He can be a center, and we'll make him play for the Slammers. So notice that we have a drop-down menu. You have the Ballers and the Slammers. You can have as many teams as we create. You can have them all displayed in this drop-down menu. So we're going to select Slammers and create player. Now, if we go to our Ballers team, we can see that we have Sam Jones. And if we go to the Slammers team, we have Jim Smith. Let's add one more player to our Ballers team. We'll call this guy Bob Miller. He can be 34 and he can be a guard. We create the player. If we go to Ballers, we can see Sam Jones and Bob Miller. So that is what our page looks like. Now let's have a look under the hood. Our database looks like this. We have two tables. One is for teams, one is for players. In our teams, we have an ID, which is the primary key. We have the name, the city, and we have a date, which is the created at date. We're not really doing anything with it, but we have that for now. On the player side, we have the ID. Again, that's the primary key. We have the first name, last name, age, position, and then we have this team ID. This team ID is what we use to link the player to the team. Now let's go to the code. The code for this project may look a little bit intimidating right now, so there are many different moving pieces, but at the end of this video, hopefully everything will make much more sense. Let's have a look at the different JSP pages. So we have the index.jsp where we display the existing teams and allow the user to create a team or a player. So the page looks like this. We have the Ballers and Slammers, and we can create the new team or new player. Our new team page has just a form on it, and using this form, we can create a new team. So let's have a look at that. We go to new team, and we can see that we can enter the team name, team city, and create the team. Remember, we also have that created at the date, but that's generated automatically as soon as we create the team, and the primary key is also generated automatically. Let's go back. Next up, we have View Team, and in the View Team page, we display the city, the team name, and then all of the players that play for the team. So let's use Ballers as an example. We can see New York Ballers, Sam Jones, who is 24 years old and a forward, and then Bob Miller, 34 and guard. Finally, we have the new player page, and here we have a form. The one thing that may look a little bit different is this select form. So what we're doing here is we're displaying the teams in a drop-down menu, and then you can select the team that you want associated with the player. So let's have a look at that. Create new player, and this is that drop-down menu. So if we add a new team, so let's go back, add one more team. Let's call these guys Jammers, and they can be from LA. Create the team. We have all three teams here. If we create a new player, we can see that now Jammers is also available. Now we're ready to dive a little bit deeper and see what's going on in our database. Let's start with our team. So we're going to, let me switch this over to new team. And I'll bring this over so we can have a better look. Now, this is how we create a new team. We need to make sure that we have the correct annotation. So entity and table, this is something we've already covered in the past. The ID is automatically generated. So this will be a unique primary key for every single team that we create. We have the team name, team city, and the created at is generated automatically as soon as we create a team. We set it to equal a new date. This is where we start with relationships. So down here, we need to start with a one-to-many relationship because remember, we have one team that has many players. So we use a one-to-many relationship, and on the other side, when we get to the player, we have many-to-one. Now, let's also look at what the player looks like, and then we'll come back to the relationship part of this. So we have the entity and the table up here again. We have the auto-generated primary key. First name, last name, age, position, all of that is standard. And then this is the relationship part. So let's jump back to the team and we'll compare the two. Now let's see what all this means. So we have the one-to-many annotation, which means one team to many players. Then we have this mapped by. And if we go back to players, we can see that one player is going to have a team. Now this name right here is the important part. If we change this, not that we would, I mean, here we have a team and it makes sense to call it a team. But if we ever change this name to something else, we would also have to make that change here for mapped by. So that is what the team here refers to. Then we have the fetch type. Fetch type lazy is the default for the most part. Sometimes it does become eager because there are certain situations where you may want to get everything. But here's what it means. We have a fetch type, which means when we look something up in the database, do we need to get all of the data that is associated with this table? Or can we just get this one table and then wait until we need the other stuff and then look for it? So what I mean by that is if we look for teams, we'll get all the different teams here, but we will not have any information about the players that belong to the team unless we actually look for them. That's where it changes from lazy to eager. Eager would get all of that information right away. Lazy gets it when we look for it. So here for us, it makes sense to use lazy. And lazy is generally the better way to go because using eager for a very large database can slow things down and can really slow down your website. So now the next part we have is this list of players. So we get the one team, and that one team has a list of players that play for it. On the other side, when we get to the player, we have many-to-one, and then we also have that fetch type. So again, same idea. And then we have this join column. So this join column is the column that we're using to link it back to the team. And if you remember the ERD that I showed you earlier, so we had this right here, the team ID is down here. This team ID is going to get that primary key from the teams. So every time we create a player, we need to get that ID from the team to make sure that they're linked. We also save that team here as a team object. Now that we've looked at the team and the player entities, we can look at the repository and service real quick. So the repository for the team really just has the find all. So we're returning all the teams that are in our database. And in the service, we have all teams, create a new team, and find a team by ID. I won't go into details here. This is something we've covered in the past. For the player, we have the player repository, again, find all players. And in the service, we have all players, create a new player, and find a player by ID. So this find player by ID, we're not actually going to use right now, but feel free to expand on this. Maybe create another page where you can click and edit players or display their data in a different way. You can get creative with that. Now we get to our main controller. This is where everything is tied together. Let me just set it up so that we can see the main controller on the right side and all the JSP pages on the left. We'll start with our index.jsp. The index.jsp displays the existing teams that we have, allows the user to create a new team, and to create a new player. So in order to get that functionality, we really just need to pass in the existing teams. The links to create a player and team will take us to another page. So to get that data, we need to use the key teams. And for the value, we go into our team service and we retrieve all the teams. Make sure that you have all the auto wired up here for the setup. I'm not going to get into this. We've covered this in the past, but make sure that it is there. So once we have all of that, we have a page that looks like this. We have our league teams, the different teams that are listed, and then create a new player and a new team. Next, we can look at the create new team. And here, if we go to our new team.jsp, the most important part to keep track of is this model attribute. You need to make sure that, let's see, this is our GET request. So we're using a GET request and a POST request. The GET request is triggered when we go to the page. The POST request is triggered when we submit the form. So when we go to the page, we need to make sure we use the model attribute team, and these two have to match. So when we have this set up correctly, the data that we put into the form will then be passed back into our controller down here. And this has to do with validation, and so does the binding result. We're not going to get into validation right now. This is where we would handle any errors. But if everything is done correctly, we would get here. We would use our team service to create the team that is passed in through the model attribute. And then we redirect back to the home page. And now let's have a look at viewing the teams. So this is just a GET request because we're simply just retrieving data. And if we go back, we go to Ballers, this is what we see. We have the city, the team, we have the different players that play for that team. And if we look at our JSP page, it is pretty much what you would expect. We have the title. I didn't point that out. So if we go back to our browser, we can see that the team name up here is Ballers and it is the title. We have the city and the name, and then we have the other information here. We use a for loop to loop through each player that belongs to the team, and we display that player's information. In order to get that information, we need to make sure that we pass in the team again. So we use team service, and we look for the team using the primary key. We have the creating a new player page, and this is our new player JSP. Let me load it up over here. So create a new player. And this doesn't look very good right now. Feel free to add some CSS and make this look nicer, but this is all about functionality right now. We have the name field, so first name, last name. Age only takes in a number, and then we have the position and the teams. Now the teams here use this drop-down menu, and let's look at how that is set up. In our controller, we need to make sure that we pass all the teams to our page, and that is right here. So we have all of the different teams are passed to our JSP page, and then we use those teams right here, and we iterate through it, and we get the team ID and the team name. So the value is the team ID so that we can easily refer to the teams that are there, and the team name is displayed to the user. So we're not displaying primary keys here, we're displaying the actual team names. The post request functions the same way that it does for creating a new team. We're getting that data from the form, saving it into our database, and then redirecting back to our home page. Now that we've covered all of the code here, let's have a look at the ERD one last time, and this is what everything looks like in the database. This should be enough to get you started, and you should now explore how you can add more features here. You could add more attributes, try changing some things around, explore. Feel free to drop your schema and create a new one if you need to. This is something that you will probably be doing quite a bit in the beginning until you get used to how everything works.